Hey, what's up? This is Mike from Law Technology, and today we're going to talk about webinars. Specifically, we're going to talk about scheduling a webinar if you have the ability to schedule a webinar and the differences between a Zoom meeting and a webinar and some things you want to make sure that you pay attention to when you're scheduling a webinar. So I've already scheduled a webinar using our account here at the law school. And so a couple of these things already look familiar to you. You would enter your topic, your description, when the webinar would be. So let's say it's today at 4, how long, the time zone, reoccurring, which more than likely it's not going to be reoccurring. It's going to be a one and done sort of thing. Whether you want registration required, I would probably keep that off since most folks have not been dealing with registration, but that's really up to you. You definitely are going to leave the passcode on. That's a requirement. Most importantly, you want to make sure video is on for your host and panelists. So we're going to go ahead and click both of those on. Audio, we want to keep to both so folks can still call in if necessary. And now let's get to the webinar options. So this is where it's super important to kind of understand what you have the ability to do here. So one of the things why webinars are so attractive to folks are the Q&A feature, which is automatically enabled here. So with the Q&A feature, it's a little bit different than the chat where folks can submit questions anonymously. So that's really the big difference between chat and Q&A. You have both in a webinar, but more than likely you're going to keep Q&A on. You do want to enable a practice session because that's going to allow you to enter the webinar beforehand before you actually go live. And this is really important because you want to make sure all your panelists, all the folks that you need to be in the webinar are there before you go live. You want to make sure require authentication to join is off. You can make the webinar on demand off. You do want to automatically record it and in the cloud, never on the local computer. It's really problematic when you're recording locally to your machine. We always, whenever we're dealing with any sort of Zoom recording, have it just handled in the cloud. It's going to make your life easier. You can go ahead and enable data center regions for this webinar. You can keep that ticked off. Approver block entry for users, you can keep that off. Everything else can be empty unless you have alternative hosts. So being that we're in the Santa Clara ecosystem, this is where you would put your alternative Santa Clara hosts, panelists, that would all be here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and schedule this. And the question I always get is, I need to invite panelists that are outside of SCU. And you have that capability here under invite panelists. So right now, no panelists are invited. I can click on edit, and this is where I would invite my panelists. So I can go ahead and put in their name and their email, and you want to make sure send invitation to all newly added panelists immediately, that is checked on. It's super important because they're going to get that invite, and that invite is how they are going to access the webinar. There's no other way they should be accessing this webinar because that link is specifically generated for them. So when they click on it, they're going to enter the webinar as a panelist with the name that you've typed in here. So super important. So I'm going to go ahead and click on cancel since I don't have any panelists for this. And then for attendees, this is the link right here, link to join webinar. I can go ahead and copy this link. This is the link that you actually shared to attendees. So folks that are watching the webinar, that's what you're going to be sharing with them. So it's important to understand that it's a separate link for panelists and attendees. And for panelists, you can't go and grab that link for them. They have to get that in their email. Now, you can, so for example, let me go ahead and I'll just use my SCU email as an example of inviting myself as a panelist, okay? So you can, right here, go back into edit once you have your panelists, and you can resend it. So if a panelist says, I can't find that email, you could go ahead and click on resend, and they would get that email again. But yeah, it's important to know that they get their own individual link, and then the link for attendees, they're both completely separate. A couple of other things you don't have to worry about, they're automatically set. And yeah, that's all you would do in regards to scheduling a webinar. So that's all we're going to cover in regards to scheduling a webinar. And in the next video, I'll actually kick off the webinar and we'll talk about it. Thanks for watching.